Hi everyone, thank you for being here today. So I will be talking about Reverend Henry Baker Tristram. He is a cleric, he is an ornithologist, he's a travel writer, and to whoever was thrilled to learn that I went to Lincoln, he also went to Lincoln. So he's an alum of Lincoln College, Oxford. He's someone who featured in my doctoral research that I did here at Oxford, and he's someone who there's actually very little kind of cultural, historical, art historical research that's been done on him, so there's plenty of work to do in case anyone is inspired. So I'm just going to give you kind of a brief introduction to him and his work, and then we'll have more time to talk about some of his publications that you see here. So Tristram, he's born in 1822 in Northumberland. He's the son of a cleric. In 1839, he matriculates at Lincoln. He graduates in 1844 with a degree in classics. And shortly thereafter, he becomes ordained as deacon, subsequently becomes a priest. And in 1873, he becomes the canon of Durham. So that's the role that he holds for the rest of his life until 1906. So that's really his day job. But in addition to that, he has two kind of aspects of his life that he's really invested in. And one of those is ornithology, so the scientific study of birds, and the other is travel writing. So Tristram is really starting off in his career in the 1840s, 50s, and 60s when the availability of steam travel, so railways, steamships, this is making domestic and foreign travel a lot more accessible to the wider British middle classes. And Tristram takes full advantage of this. He travels extensively throughout his life. He is mostly going to what we would now refer to as the Middle East, so the Holy Lands, the Levant. He goes to what is modern day Jordan. You can see in that book over there. He goes to southwestern Anatolia. And then he also goes further afield to Japan and the South Pacific. So what is he actually doing during some of his travels? Part of the time he is conducting research into ornithology, and he's documenting the types of natural historical specimens that he encounters. He actually had an interest in ornithology from a young age, and he becomes an accomplished ornithologist over his career. He publishes regularly from the 1850s onwards. And I think maybe most interestingly in this respect, he publishes a paper in 1859 where he expresses support for Charles Darwin's theories of evolution, which had really just come to light in the previous year. So this is very early within kind of the context of that debate, and it's really quite controversial because he is an Anglican cleric. Later on in his life, he kind of fluctuates between supporting Darwinism and somewhat rejecting it, potentially for institutional reasons, we don't really know. But he ends up writing letters to Darwin. He allows Darwin to publish some of his own work within Darwin's later publications. And he kind of was able to reconcile his own scientific research into, as well as his religious conservatism, which is really interesting for kind of this early period in this debate. So you can see some of Tristram's kind of ornithological work published in this publication, which is called The Survey of Western Palestine, Fauna and Flora of Palestine, which was published in 1884. So we can take a look at that later. And the image in question is actually a bird that was first really kind of identified by Tristram, and its colloquial name is Tristram's grackle. So his legacy in ornithology lives on within kind of these various animals that he has named after him. So I said that Tristram is traveling regularly over the course of his life. Part of the time he's doing this scientific, academic, ornithological research, but the other part of the time he's doing kind of basic touristy things. He's visiting ancient monuments, kind of sites that have been recently excavated, and he's writing about the historical significance of these places, the people he encounters, etc. And he ends up publishing a lot of these observations in various travel books that he publishes throughout his career. So he publishes 13 travel books over the course of his life. These are not academic texts. They're very much for the armchair tourist or someone who might potentially actually visit these sites. So therefore a much wider public audience than maybe his more ornithological stuff. He is a cleric, so he's really interested in visiting places that have some kind of biblical significance. This explains why he goes to what was then called the Holy Lands, many times modern-day Israel, Palestine. He visits places that have other early Christian significance, such as Smyrna, which is on the eastern Mediterranean coast in modern-day Turkey. And I wouldn't necessarily say that Tristram was a household name in his lifetime, but he was very popular among people who were interested in this kind of Christian-inflected travel writing. So he was very well known in this space. And then I think something that we need to keep in mind when reading Tristram's publications is that he often deploys disparaging Orientalist language to talk about the especially non-Christian people that he encounters during his travels. And he does express imperialist sentiments when talking about the world outside Britain. So I think we need to read Tristram as someone who is embedded in this wider British imperial context, especially with regards to British interests in the Middle East. So that's just something to keep in mind when we look at these publications. So to actually talk about some of the publications, I think maybe the thing that brought me to Tristram, and I think is most interesting about him, is that he really embraced the novel artistic technologies that were arising over the course of his career. So almost all of his publications include images, and they come in the form of wood engravings, they come as chromolithographs, and they come as photographs, especially, which is really interesting. So, as far as we know, Tristram mostly commissioned other artists to produce images for him. So these are not necessarily images that he produced himself. So he either commissioned artists to produce these images, or he purchased the rights to reproduce these images after the original works were produced. So a lot of the engravings, for example, were produced from photographs, as you can see here, and others might have been produced from photographs or sketches. So we have two examples of wood engraving here. The publication on the very left-hand side, this is called The Land of Moab, published in 1873, and this is depicting lands in what is modern-day Jordan. And those engravings are based off photographs. The publication here is titled 7 Golden Candlesticks, produced in 1871. And this is showing southwestern Anatolia, so modern-day Turkey. There's a lot of early Christian history there. And for this publication, he used photographs by a photographer based in Smyrna named Alexandra Solovyev, who was an Armenian-Hungarian artist who subsequently also moved to London. Really interesting character in his own right. We have this book, which is called Scenes in the East. This is full of lithographs, chromolithographs produced from photographs. And this one that I mentioned, Survey of Western Palestine. This is more of his ornithological work, so also chromolithographs. And this final book is called Pathways of Palestine, published between 1881 and 1882. This is his only fully photographically illustrated work, and it includes images from the British commercial photographer Frank Mason Good. We can talk about this more, but printing photography at this time was still incredibly expensive, so this is very much a luxury product, whereas some of the more wood engraved goods would have been much more accessible to a wider audience. And I will add that Tristram also published regularly in kind of popular journals such as The Sunday at Home, and he wrote introductions to the work of other artists and authors, so he was kind of very involved within this space more broadly. So that is all to say. I think there's a lot to learn from Tristram and his work, and a lot of research left to be done. I think we can learn a lot about popular Victorian Christian travel writing, Protestant tourism, uses of print and photography and publishing, intersections of science and cultural travel, and also kind of the role of art and culture within these wider histories of British imperialism. And I think Tristram is a lens through which we can view all these different things. So that's 10 minutes.